Yes, everyone. Good evening, Spurs fans. Welcome back to the Irish Hotspur here. We have once again an illustrious panel of Sean, Sam, Dave, and Johnny here. We're going to discuss plenty of transfer rumors in and around the Tottenham Hotspur squad, players going out, players coming in, and then we have a good question on Thomas Frank and the youngsters in terms of how he's going to try to incorporate them with the busy Champions League campaign as well as Premier League campaign, which we all know he has to finish much higher than Ange Postecoglou did this last season. So we're going to get into it here. Everybody, please smash the like button, get into the comments, please. Let us know how you're feeling about any of the questions we might be asking. And if you are a member, you can also as well reserve time at the end of the show, and we'll be happy to answer anything that we might not have gotten to during this panel show. Good to see some people already in the house. Alpesh, Shem, Rainman, Brian, Jason Bell, King Hoddle, Ian Ferguson, all piling in here. Appreciate you all. Thank you for joining us this fine evening. But we're going to make the best use of your time as well as also the best use of our fellow panelists' time. And we're going to go straight to Sean on this one with Vicario. Rumors of him from Calcio Mercato going to AC Milan. His agents were having a meeting with some AC Milan officials, and it's rumored that maybe they're longtime admirers of Vicario and want him to replace Mike Maignan, who's expected to leave this summer. Now, of course, with all the reports, maybe should be taken, I think, with a pinch of salt, Shawnee, but where do you think the fan base is at, and where are you at with Vicario if you had the chance to sell him this summer? Would you take the opportunity to sell Vicario and look to replace him?
Yeah. Hi, Jack. Hi, Dave. Hi, everybody. Hi, guys.
To be honest, mate,
this one's caught me a little bit off guard. If I'm honest, when I saw it this morning or I saw it last night, I was like, "What?
Yeah,
we got to go back into the goalkeeper transfer market again." It's a very difficult market to get right. I don't know if we have got it right with Vicario. Look, I think he's a great shot stopper. And look, he kept us in the game. I think it's Bilbao, and in as much as that last minute save, if it went a different direction, if he didn't make it, we go to extra time. I think the win was in United sales, so we probably don't have the title. But he also, his flopping and fumbling almost put us in the trouble zone about 20 minutes earlier in that game, I think it was. And it wasn't for Mickey van der Ven, and it was a buffoon.
Yeah.
So. And I think that's the sort of tail of the tape a little bit with our goalkeepers over the last couple of years. I think Kinski, came in. First time I saw Kinski, wonderful right peg outside of the boot, goal fade down the left channel towards Timo Werner. I and everyone in the stadium was like, wow, this guy's amazing, exactly what we need. But then Butterfingers emerged and the confidence dropped. Same with Vicario. I think he's a great shot stopper, but I think he's at his best when he doesn't have very much time to think. The more time he has, the more prone he is to a mistake. But I kind of was like settled on our goalkeepers. I just didn't really want. I'm kind of like not expecting much in the way of movement. Mike Maignan to Chelsea is obviously he wants to go to Chelsea, but Milan won't let him go for us unless it's a certain fee, and then they're going to need a replacement. If they want Vicario, look, I'm okay with it, but only if we bring in someone better. Because I think that Vicario, as much as I think he's vulnerabilities, I think he's the highest in the pecking order by a country mile at the moment. I think Kinski's too young. He's not proven to me that he's solid enough. Same with Austin, Gunter, Keeley, yada, yada, yada. I just think if we're going to sell Vicario, we need to bring in someone better. Who that is, I'll be entirely honest. I haven't really, had a great chance to think about it. But I'm surprised by the transfer. I don't give it much credibility because it's an area of the pitch where we're probably okay. So I just don't see I don't see any need for us to sell that guy.
Just making ourselves more busy than we maybe need to be. I feel like, it could be something reserved for the next summer or something like that. But part I didn't really believe too much in the rumor was when they said that if they were to sell Vicario, they would just replace him with what we already have, which would be Kinski, Brandon Austin. And I was like, hold on there. That sounds like, not really a great way to start off the summer. But then again, Johnny and, Sam, I mean, Dave and I did our season player ratings, and we did say Vicario kind of had a season to forget. We didn't think, maybe he had, let's say, the best of seasons. Where are you at with Vicario, Johnny? I mean, would you sell him this summer if you had the chance?
I mean, was that based on the fact that he was injured? And look, for me...
Yeah, we took out then.
Yeah, I mean, look, when he came back, I remember in those games when he came back, I mean, there was a stat out there that he made more saves than any keeper in the Premier League, and yet he'd been out injured for X amount of weeks. That's how bad our defence was, and that's how good he was at shot stopping. But and here's the but. I think Thomas Frank, when he likes the defenders to command that box in the air, and it's obvious his weakest point of his game is his aerial capabilities. We saw it in the event in the moment that Sean was talking about just now, where he came out completely faffed with the ball. We've seen it countless times, and it hadn't been the incredible acrobatics of Mickey van der Ven, that ball was going in. So we saw the good, the bad, and the ugly of him. When I look at someone like Mark Flecken, who's gone out to buy Leverkusen now and left them, I'm thinking to myself, I like Kelleher, right? Who's come in from Liverpool. I always rated him really highly. I think he's a really good keeper. He's fantastic with his feet. I think although he's a good keeper, I think the one weakness in his game, I'm not 100% convinced that he can correct, and that's his aerial superiority. And I think for
do you not think that's something though that Frank and his coaching team can bring to him? Because isn't that what this whole project is about? These guys can develop them.
I was wondering when you were going to pop up with that.
No, just asking.
Oh no, but no, it's fair enough. It's a fair enough comment, but no, I think yes, he will. But I sometimes feel, from a physical point of view, Dave, that he gets bullied. It's not a new thing, is it? They need to pay the money unless they come up with a proper fee. The thing is that these stories are all very well and good. Italy don't have any money. I mean, would you swap Mike Mannion for Vicario?
Yeah,
consider it. I'd consider it. Yeah,
100%, yeah.
Okay.
Isn't the thing though, like the idea that he can't command his box? Like,
right. So what I'm saying is, right. So what would you get with Mannion that you don't get with Vicario? What you get is a beast in the air, right? He ain't going to be bullied so much in the air. In my opinion, he's strong in the air. And that's the point I'm making here. When you have an obvious weakness, it's obviously, not being great with your feet, which is why Arsenal got rid of Ramsdale and went for Raya. A lot of people didn't understand why they went for that. And when you look at it now, you can understand it. And if I was Thomas Frank right now, Thomas Frank is the type of manager that looks for every single weakness that he can find. And I know people are going to level with me. Well, he never beat Ange Postecoglou. He beat lots of other teams, right? I would think that when you're looking at that, it's an obvious weakness that other clubs have exploited many, many times, whether it was putting two players on him and seeing him flapping around at corners, set pieces. I don't see incredible improvement in that area. So maybe he'll last another season and they will look. But Rob Birch is still the goalkeeping coach. There's not going to be another goalkeeping coach coming in. So whether or not, Frank can say to Rob Birch, look, he needs to improve this. I'm sure everyone's had that conversation anyway, but he hasn't done it. I think the only people that would be sort of probably delighted if he left would be the defence and the kids who were played in that defence. Then they wouldn't have to listen to him screaming abuse at them every time after he's just made a mistake. But I think he'll stay. But I wouldn't complain if he went. I personally think, I will tell you, even though Kinski is not the sum of all parts either, Kinski is 100%, in my opinion, better in the air.
I do think Kinski's better at claiming crosses. But
yeah.
I've seen plenty of like skinny, sort of, let's say, not big, broad-shouldered goalkeepers still find a way to sort of command their penalty area and command the box. You think of even David De Gea, was probably a bit similarly framed to Vicario, but he didn't seem to have as much of an issue with that. Van der Sar as well, had that sort of command of his box. And Vicario is not necessarily short or anything like that, but he has that proneness to spill, I think is what Sean said, or flop or flap or whatever, flappy hands, Vicario. So I think it is something you can work on. It's just whether he can technically improve on that maybe in the next season. I think that's probably as long as maybe we could give him. But I mean, Sam, if you had the chance to sell Vicario, would you do it?
I mean, it's weird, this Vicario thing with the crosses, because I always think back to the Chelsea game, and that was probably, I know we conceded 4, but for me, that was probably the best goalkeeper performance I've seen, like in a very long time. Only really rivaled by the Alisson versus PSG first leg, where he made like 100 saves. But I just, in terms of why I bring that Chelsea game up, is because Vic was, coming 60 yards out of his goal and throwing himself into the tackle, at the risk of a red, but making, great defensive like saves for us when no one else, we were still playing so high up and no other defenders were back. So for me, when I look at him like in the box, I don't understand. Is it like he doesn't know what to do when the ball comes in? He hasn't got like a game plan of, I go one way, I go another, or I jump here, I jump there. Because I don't see it as a fear thing. It's not like he's afraid to get bumped in the air. He might be afraid now because of the whole, it's a problem for him, right? People pick up on it as a weakness. So, maybe his confidence has gone, but I don't think that he's afraid of the contact. When I saw the rumors a few days ago, and I saw it was like it was saying around 40 million euros, or some stuff I was seeing was saying that they were potentially going to offer like Tomori in like a swap deal. For me, I would probably take it. In terms of, as you say, you look at Arsenal, what they've done with their goalkeepers, and they pretty much bring in the new goalkeeper every year. And I'm not saying I want to bring in a goalkeeper every year, but like they're constantly putting pressure on the number 1 spot to perform. And obviously David Raya, since they signed him, has been very good. And I mean, David Raya as well, he's not that tall. He's only like 6'2", I think. And it's not, I mean, it's tall, don't get me wrong, but like on the goalkeeper side, it's not that big. I think Vic's 6'4". So it's like, why is Raya so comfortable with playing in the crosses? But
isn't it that confidence thing that you mentioned? Where
Yeah,
it's kind of like certain keepers just are good at just, knowing that that's their ball and they just come out and claim it. Whereas you mentioned like Vicario seems to have that indecisiveness, about it. He doesn't seem to know actually what to do in these situations. It's almost like he's reacting to it instead of really just coming out and just claiming it, like you see many keepers do. Plenty of keepers are going for sketchy crosses, but they somehow just come out with it, maybe because they have that belief that, that's their ball to come and claim.
Yeah, I mean, look, it doesn't seem to be in his nature. And, I guess we'll find out whether a goalkeeping coach for a man who, likes a strong defense and likes his goalkeeper to be able to claim the ball from a set piece. If he can't sort of turn Vicario around, then there's not much we can do. But then in terms of Vicario, just like as a man, I love him. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I get what people are like, oh, why is this guy on the bench like chewing Mickey van der Ven's ear off about the game? It's like, because he obviously has insights that he wants to get out. He's just a passionate, full-blooded Italian man. And that quote, I'll always remember that quote. He said, I would have signed in blood and walked to London. And it's like, he has the kind of attitude that I like wish other players had.
Totally.
That bit of spite, but for the badge, not for like I'm maybe a Maddison type where you think his spite, when he was having his little battles with Yates from Nottingham Forest, or Mope, it was all about his image. And I feel like Vicario doesn't really care, but I feel like he's like, I don't know, maybe he lacks the sort of social awareness to realize that he's like a really big and sometimes jarring presence. I think he just does what he feels, and I respect that. So if we don't let him go, I think his goalkeeping ability is good enough. Is it the best ability? I don't think so, as we've sort of highlighted with the crosses. But in terms of shot stopping, great goalkeeper. But I think it's Sean who says that shot stopping should be the remit of a goalkeeper. That should be the number 1. So if you can't stop the shots, and then maybe that leads into this Kinski. We've seen him.
It's Roy
be a bit
Keane
of a
that said it, mate. I think I just stole it from Roy Keane. He said, "It's his job. It's his job. Do your job, baby."
Well, I definitely heard it from you, so I'll give you the
I appreciate
credit.
that.
I think it used to be the bare minimum, the shot stopping, as the priority, but it's kind of almost diverted away from that. Now it does seem like, you'll get away with sometimes a goalkeeper that is good with their feet, but then, isn't necessarily the best of shot stoppers. And I think Sean is right. It felt that way with Kinski, where his first game against Liverpool, everybody was oohing and ahhing, like, oh, this guy's ready to replace Vicario now. And then we give him a couple more games and he's letting things go straight through his hands. And it was like, well, Vicario would save that 10 times out of 10.
21 years of age. I mean, listen, I was out in the playground playing catch, when I was a kid, just because he caught the ball don't make him a great goalkeeper. I'm looking for more than that. And I think you need to command your area. Modern 21st century goalkeeper, great with your feet. Kinski's type pass we saw in that first game outside of the boot, unbelievable. But the complete goalkeeper, there aren't lots of them. There are those that excel in certain areas. But what I think you can't have, if you want to be elite, you can't have a glaring weakness. And at the moment, Vicario has a glaring weakness, which I hope he can correct. But it is there. We all know it. Just like Lloris had a bit of a problem flapping at crosses, and that was his weakness. But we shall see.
Just
go on.
I'll just super quickly. I always think that I remember Ange, right, when we were getting bullied in the penalty area and we conceded like 3 or 4 goals. I think whoever it was who first, was it Liverpool that first identified it, and then it went on and on for a couple of months.
I think.
City, that's right. Yeah, City. And then basically, like when Ange was challenged on "Are you fixing it?" he was basically like, "No, we're going to do our own thing or whatever." And then in the start of the next season, start of season 2, they didn't go after it as much. And then he used it as like a needle to go back at the journalist saying, well, you used to have a crack at me about the set pieces that we've only considered 2 this year or whatever it was. But it didn't look like he had fixed it or embraced the change to solve it. It just looked like it stopped happening because other teams stopped using that tactic for whatever reason. And I just feel like, going back to your point that you asked Johnny there, Dave, if you've got a coach that is looking at the vulnerabilities of the team and you actually spend time on the training ground working on stopping those vulnerabilities, then under Thomas Frank, even if that is a red flag, it's a massive elephant in the room, I would imagine that it will be worked on. Whereas Ange is just like, no, we're just going to ignore all that shit. And if it goes away, then it was never a problem in the first place. Stop having a crack at me. And if it is a problem, then we're not going to fix it. We're just going to worry about ourselves anyway. So I think with Thomas Frank, at least the attention to detail on the vulnerabilities will mean that if it is a highlightable problem again, it should at least be worked on the training ground, which will hopefully be a good point.
I just say to the people in there who were saying I'm only focusing on the negative, can I be clear? I really like Vicario. There's lots of positives, right? Lots of positives, okay? I'm not focusing on that. But if I'm a coach of an opposite team, my job is to focus on the weaknesses. And we're saying, would they sell him? And the weakness is what we know. And can he correct it? That's the question. And, that's the answer that needs to be answered.
I think
needs to be answered.
Look, I think when you look at the Vicario situation, right, his weaknesses are set pieces, and I would argue his distribution went downhill last season as well. The number of times he led us into trouble. And, to highlight it, I would argue, if he did end up costing us that Europa League final, because let's not forget, that wasn't even a good free kick by Man United delivering into the box. That's just a high punt up in the air, a hit and hope. And he absolutely blundered it. And only Mickey van de Ven saved his skin that night. We probably would have had conversations right after Europa League final about this guy, to be quite frank with you. So I think, that is a huge weakness that needs to be fixed. And I'm a bit torn on this when it comes to Thomas Frank and his coaching team. Do they want to work with this guy, or would they prefer Kinski? 2 reasons. I think one reason where I think they might want to work with Vicario is at Brentford, I think Flecken faced the most long shots from outside, more shots from outside the box, and made the most saves from outside the box, which shows that Thomas Frank puts that defensive structure in, tries to, stop the opposition's strength and force them into shots and pop shots outside the box. And that is one thing Vicario is very good at, is shot stopping. I would argue, I think he's one of the best in the world at shot stopping. But also another key part of Frank's stability at Brentford was defensive set pieces. They only conceded 2 defensive set pieces. And I need to go and do my research into it to really sort of make up my final decision on this. But how much was that down to the keeper coming out, aiming and punching? And how much was that down to the setup and the players actually doing their jobs and clearing that ball? And at the end of the day, you know, I think Thomas Frank is a goalkeeper. It is a guy that needs a good, solid goalkeeper, one that can just do the basics of goalkeeping. Like, I understand that playing with the ball at your feet is maybe a modern day way that goalkeeper needs to go. But coming in and dealing with crosses is nothing new. That's always been bread and butter for a goalkeeper, along with shot stopping. You know, they've always had to do that. It's only playing with the ball at their feet that is new. Frank would probably take a lot of that responsibility off the goalkeeper anyway, which it doesn't matter where you've got Kinski or Vicario on goals. They're not going to be instructed to play as often out with the ball out from their feet. So you're actually just looking at the basics of the goalkeeper. And that's where I worry. You know, do they look at Vicario's vulnerability from set pieces and go, no, we'll go with Kinski if we can't go and find another number one? And I think that's where maybe I have the grey area around whether Thomas Frank will use him or not. But in terms of shot stopping, and if the defence can force teams to take more shots outside the box instead of being so easy to rip open, I think Vicario is your guy there. At the end of the day, what I would actually personally do if I was Thomas Frank, I would look at the squad. I would suggest there's deeper issues. He needs to fix that midfield. He needs to fix that front line. And I think with the goalkeeper, I think him and his team can actually work with both goalkeepers over the course of this season. And then come the end of next season, make that decision. And if both of them aren't the answer, then just go out and buy a goalkeeper that you think is. But right now, I think between the two of them, we have enough to sit in behind Thomas Frank's back line and be able to steady the ship.
Sounds like, we've given majority of our answers on the Vicario situation.
Sorry, can I just say one more thing? I am concerned about some of the conversations happening around this summer transfer window in general. You know, we're talking about, should we sell Vicario? It's been the same around Romero. It's been the same around Sonny all summer transfer window. They're not the players that we should be looking to get rid of. The players we should be looking to get rid of are the players that, when given the opportunity as part of the squad, didn't take them. They should be the ones flushed out, the likes of your Basumas and stuff like that, not the likes some of our better players. And at the end of the day, I'm worried because we suffer from leadership qualities within the group anyway. But Son, Romero, and Vicario, a 3-year leadership group, and to a degree, the spine of your team. You end up selling that. You have to create a whole new spine of the team and stuff like that. Again, I am concerned around how this transfer window and some of the reports coming out of it around what we're trying to sell and what we're trying to bring in.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, personally, I'm also a huge Vicario fan, so I think I'd be willing to give him another season at least and just see if he can improve in those areas of claiming crosses, like we were saying. See if Frank can get something maybe a bit better out of him. Spurs, though, have decided, by the way, guys, if you didn't know already, to take up that option to buy Mathys Tel permanently from Bayern Munich for 35 million euros. And Tel has signed a contract until 2031, big one. And he joined on loan last January, making 20 appearances, scoring 3 goals and 2 assists. And the signing, once again, like many signings at Spurs, have divided the fan base, with some saying it's a great signing, others saying it's one that maybe is a bit underwhelming. Should we be looking as Tel, like as a good signing for the future? Maybe someone to potentially replace Sonny in the long term. Is he the long-term successor to Son Heung-Min? Are we comfortable with that?
You know what's funny, Sean, about this? I was just going to say, because I think I had this conversation with Sean earlier. Those who are trying to justify that it's great value are saying it's 35 million euros. And those that are saying it's not good value are quoting it's the real price, which is not 35 million euros, because it's 35 million euros plus the loan fee, which is £7 million, plus the add-on with another 5. But that said, I don't think that he's ever thinking about playing Mathys Tel as a winger. I think he sees him as an inside forward. And I would not be surprised over the next 18 months, although I wouldn't have spent the money on him if we were limited with funds. I think he'll be trying to groom him into becoming another Brian Mbeumo, if you want my honest opinion, because I've seen how he's developed Mbeumo from a player who had pace, but he was all over the place. And finally, he found himself in positions, could not score. His shooting was abysmal. And look where we are now, as a 25-year-old, what he's producing. And when you look at Tel, at only 20 years of age, I can see that Thomas Frank is the ideal person to develop him over, the next couple of years.
Where my concern comes in around the signing, like, I understand the potential, but like, at the end of the day, Thomas Frank is making a step up to Tottenham. He's going to have to win games. You don't win games, you're under pressure, but and trying to develop players on the job to help put points on the board regularly enough to be able to give you time to develop these guys is where my concern comes in. Like, we signed Mathys Tel last January, right? And I feel like, I'm not going to say making a similar mistake like we did with Werner, but like last January, we brought in Mathys Tel. He made 20 appearances, scored 3 goals with 2 assists. Now, when we signed Mathys Tel, we needed someone to come in here and contribute, hit the ground running straight away. And he couldn't do that, and that's where my concern comes in. Like, he's coming into Tottenham again in the exact same situation. And like, regardless whether it was Hans Postecoglou heading into the season or Thomas Frank, they need a ready-made front line to work with and be able to develop these guys along the journey. And I just feel like we're not, by making that signing, are we adding to the problem? Because our large problems for me last season was, we were pushed much higher up the pitch. But like on breakaways in front of goal, in general, we just weren't clinical. And in large parts of games, we just couldn't click whatsoever. There was no free-flowing football or anything between them. You've already got Wilson Odegaard that needs to be developed. Johnson, as much goals as he scored last season, there's still a lot of work for the guy to be able to develop. Solanke, Richarlison, there's still question marks around whether they're good enough to lead the front line moving forward. Then you move out onto the left-hand side. You've got likes of your Mikey Moore, Son in decline. And for me, I think where I'm underwhelmed is like, we do need that Mbeumo, that Semenyo, that sort of player, that statement winger that can come in and produce. Now, I just think it's taken a huge gamble bringing in Tel and already putting Thomas Frank under a lot of pressure. And I just feel like we're making the same mistake, to a large degree, that we've got so many players there that are raw that we need ready-made to go now, hit the ground running, that can consistently contribute.
His stats were worse than that, Dave, actually. He played 34 games, 1,714 minutes. And he scored 3 goals, 1 a tap-in, 1 a penalty, and 1 a decent goal. I mean, it's hardly inspiring. What I would say to you, I totally hear where you're coming from, and I don't disagree with anything you're saying. And I've only come round because of the coach that's coming in and the belief, in my belief, that there's money to spend on this window, and the fact that we haven't laid out any money because it's just money that.
And because you've been listening to me convince you.
Yeah,
you would hope with that interview today. You would hope with the interview today and the words that maybe you're correct on what you're saying there.
He's going to be an absolute baller, ladies and gentlemen. I've been keeping everybody's receipts. Everybody that's telling me he's trash, he's rubbish, he's useless.
Never been rubbish. Come on.
I'm not saying
you, Johnny. Potentially could be a baller.
He is going to be a baller. He's got hard work when no one else works hard. Not even the manager, not even the other 10 players on the pitch. It's a team sport, not an individual sport. This guy was put out in those 1,700 minutes. Most of them, the vast majority, were in the Premier League when we learned after the fact that there was a deprioritization, not of the Premier League. There was a deprioritization of care, of giving a shit. He was the only person who gave a shit in the second half of the season when no one else did. He has tenacity, he has drive, he has intellect, he has guile, he has confidence. And in a system that is going to make those wingers come a little bit more narrow, as Johnny was alluding to there, and play in a 3 or a 2 as an inside forward or as part of a two-man strike force, this guy is going to surprise everybody. And I went out of my way to go and get a vault. I've got a digital vault. I've been capturing clips galore. I'm putting them all in. I'm going to make a little montage of all the people that wrote him off. When he gets me 15 to 20 GA next season, he is going to embarrass all of them. And I'm going to be here for it. He is going to absolutely surprise the upside.
Let me ask you a question, right? I agree. I think there is a lot of raw potential there. Like, he sort of changed my mind towards the end of the season when I look at him with the ball at his feet. One thing I spotted with Kulusevski, how quick he moves that. You can't teach that. That's either that. You either have it or you don't have it. And I think there's a lot of raw potential there that you, over the next 2 to 3 years, if developed right, you can there is a real player there. But worst case scenario, and just going off the transfer window we had last summer, if the club don't bring in some of the big names that are banded about, and they don't bring in, the wholesale changes that maybe it's been alluded that are in the pipeline, and he is that signing for that left-hand side. Do you think he's ready to deliver 20 GA next season? Because that's what's expected at Tottenham Hotspur. And if we want to rise up the league, we want to try and compete in the Champions League and try and have a domestic cup run, you are going to need that sort of output.
Yeah, well, I'm also of the mindset that he is going to be a part of a rotation system, and that there is someone that's going to come in, whether that's Eze, whether that's a versatile winger like a Semenyo, whether that's a Jack Grealish. We can talk about all those if you want to in a minute. But like for me, if he is the guy, if he is the left winger, and that Tottenham, and that's it, essentially on the left side, then yeah, massive problems. But that's not. I'm not going to aim that at him. I'm going to aim that at the club. The club then are going to carry the can for that.
Yeah, 100%.
For me, I look at this guy and I think that he has. There's areas of his game that he clearly needs to improve. I think that one of these, and a lot of it's technique. I think he's got a really poor technique with his shot. I think he's got a pillow foot. Like he puts his foot through it, but he doesn't quite connect cleanly. Someone like Semenyo, on the other hand, has got unbelievable techers with his striking. The way that he can find the corner and put his laces through it. He doesn't place the ball in the corner. He buries it in the corner. And I absolutely love that about him. And I think that Tottenham are going to need to bring in someone who's a little bit older. Maybe it is a Semenyo, maybe it's not. But someone that he can learn off in the techers of how to put his foot through the ball and keep a little bit calm. But in terms of, do you have the raw materials there and like the ingredients to cook something spicy? I absolutely think that we do. And at 35 million quid, even if you include the loan fee, 40 million quid, that's the going rate these days for someone with high potential. He is just turned 20 years old, and people are judging him like he's been around the block, because ultimately he's come from Bayern Munich.
I don't think people are judging him on the block, though, Sean. I think people are judging him on what Tottenham's needs are now. Now, obviously, there's still time in the window. Obviously, there's still time in the window, and Tottenham have the potential. But if this is that signing for that side, you go into next season, and it's a big gamble.
Well, that was the question I was going to ask maybe Shawnee, though. Like, in an ideal scenario, could this be a good signing if you bring someone for the long term to succeed, Sonny, which would be Mathys Tel, but then at the same time, you bring someone in for the here and now that would actually pick up, those, fill in those boots in the best way they can for Sonny. And that would be a Semenyo or an Mbeumo. And then Mathys Tel is the longer term sort of kind of option. That would be, in my opinion, actually not a bad way to approach it. Hopefully Mathys Tel isn't the only person to come in.
100%. And that's the kind of the full gamut of expectation here is that Tottenham need. We don't need a lot of players. We just need four, maybe five players that make you sit up and go, oh wow, I don't really. Now that we've got Mathys Tel in, as I said, I don't know if we're going to bring this one up, but for me, you've already got 11. You've got 11 wingers on our books now, right? If you're going to bring in a Semenyo, an Eze, a Mbeumo, whoever, Jack Grealish, whatever, then you need to strip that number of 11 down to about 5 or 6. So for me, on the basis that Mathys Tel has been signed permanently, you need to send some guys out on loan. Some of the guys, like everyone last season was calling for Mikey Moore to get more minutes. I've always said I don't think he's ready. I think he needs to go out on loan. I think Ajay needs to go out on loan. All due respect, but I think that Mathys Solomon needs to probably be sold.
But it looks like the club are going to give him a chance, though.
I know.
If you look at the rumours that are out there now, it looks like Son's on his way out, and Solomon and Tel will be your two left-sided choices.
Yeah, and that to me is problematic. Like, I've got no problem with Solomon at all. Like I said on the video earlier on, this is all purely about the player, purely about his levels. I just don't think that he has shown his injury-prone problems. I get it, all that stuff, but life is life, right? You have to roll the dice. If they've made the decision to make Mathys Tel permanent, and then Mathys Solomon is also under consideration to be brought back in to be a permanent part of the squad, then that means it's incredibly difficult to see where do you squeeze in another top-level winger. Yeah. And we need that. So if Mathys Tel has been made permanent, unless you're going to make him permanent and then loan him out, which I don't think is going to happen, then for me, the Solomon issue, to me, is futile. It's unnecessary. He surely cannot be, unless Brennan Johnson's going, but he isn't for homegrown reasons, and he scored 20 goals last season. So, like, where do you find the room in the squad to bring in an Mbeumo, an Eze, a Jack Grealish, or whatever, one of these senior players that we want, if you've already got 11 players and Solomon's one of them, and the only demonstration of value that Solomon has brought is at the championship level, even when he was playing football at Tottenham, in the Premier League, the only demonstration of a good output that he put in was against Burnley, who was a team that was of championship level. So for me, no, it's no disrespect to Manor Solomon, but I just think we have too many eggs in the egg cartons, right? We've got too many. We need to make some room to bring in an Semenyo. And so now that Mathys Tel's been made, if they decided to not bring in Mathys Tel and then they gave Solomon the chance, fair enough. But I don't know what you're going to gather from watching preseason football. It's a glorified fitness test. That's all it is. I don't care if you're playing Bayern Munich. Championship level football is more competitive than a pre-season friendly against Bayern Munich. So for me, Solomon has to go.
Eugene told me, he said, Jack, we have far too many wingers. So that was kind of a point that you were kind of making there. How do you make room for this?
It's easy,
here and now signing, though, if you have this many wingers, it would have to be a busy outgoings. Busy.
I mean, listen, I've seen Josh Keeley play quite a few times. Then down to Orient, I've seen him play in the youth. He's a top keeper as well as Gunter is, but he still needs developing. He's not ready yet to become number 2 in the Premier League. In fact, in the final that I was at Wembley against Charlton, in my opinion, he moved his feet wrong and he should have saved that free kick. He's been outstanding. Don't get me wrong. He got a goal. He got an assist. He's got everything going for him. But I think he needs another year or so out on loan.
Dave, you said he wanted out of here. You said he's actually backs himself to leave, right? Or something.
Well, that was the discussions I had with someone who, apparently speaks to someone in his camp quite regularly, that he was a bit upset with the likes of Kinski coming in, and that he feels like his pathway is blocked up to a large degree, and that there was a lot of interest in him as well. I know clubs around Europe send scouts to regular games at Leyton Orient to watch this kid, and there is interest in and around him. So it'll be interesting what the club decide to do, because it was a bit weird last season as well that everyone was given a chance in preseason goalkeeper wise, bar Josh Keeley. Even though he was around, he ended up going with the under-21s. So. Let's wait and see what happens around Josh Keeley. But I do agree with Johnny. Like last season, he was League One. You do need to make him to take that step up to the championship, or that needs to be the next step. Can he produce week in, week out at that level? Because it's a huge risk bringing especially a goalkeeper, which is such a pivotal position in modern day football. If you get that wrong, it doesn't matter what good team what setup you have in front of it. It's going to cost you games of football. So for me, I think it's too much of a risk, especially with a goalkeeper. And at that young age, just to put him straight in and around the Tottenham first team. I do think if they don't cash in on the guy, then it probably will be another loan. But it'll be interesting to see what happens around that situation. Now, look, the information or what was fed to me could be completely wrong. Let's wait and see.
We're not in a terrible position, Paul. We got young goalkeepers, Johnny, right? We got Luka Gunter, Josh Keeley. We have Kinski. It's not a bad position to be in at the end.
No, it's a good position to be in. And, the three of them, Keeley, Mikey Moore, Donnelly, they've all been offered multiple clubs in the Championship. And, with Davis at Birmingham and Mason at West Brom, those will be probably the most telegraphed clubs for these players to go to. But I can't see Spurs getting rid of Keeley, might want to go. But as we've seen before, if he went, Vicario, and Keeley, they thought that Josh had more potential than Kinski. Then, things change very quickly in football. Yeah, injuries, players suddenly losing form. We've seen it before. Look how many goalkeepers Arsenal had. Arsenal had Jay Leno. He got injured by Maupay. Thought that's their season over. In comes Emiliano Martinez, who was even better. And then he leaves and thought Arsenal are screwed now. In comes Ramsdale, right? They bought another backup. Can't remember his name. The American guy, Canadian.
Turner. He's terrible.
Turner. And then they bring in Raya, and then he goes. They're constantly looking at top keepers. I would rather us maintain a top keeper due to the fact, guys, as I've mentioned before with Sean. Up until the last 18 months, I've never seen so many goalkeepers coming into contact with midfielders and strikers, because when they're trying to play the ball out, never seen so many injuries to goalkeepers. We've had Pope, we've had Allison, we've had Vicario. If you go through them, nearly every club has had an injury to a goalkeeper.
Yeah. Fair point.
Thank you for
Fair
the
point.
support, by the way,
Marky.
Paul. Yeah.
Let us know what your thoughts are on what we've had to say. If you disagree, don't be afraid to push back in the chat, my man, and let us know.
I wanted to just get quickly as well. Thank you for the support, Paul. I wanted to get quickly maybe Sam's opinion on Mathys Tel and take DB's comment, as well as Rowan saying Tel will be a good squad player, but we need 3 mainstays. Last thing we want is a recital of the Spurs News Now homepage every day. Rowan was saying was so disappointed with Tel's loan. He's one of my favorite youngsters on Football Manager last season. This loan was just mid, though. Such bad finishing, too. I mean, do you have any opinions on the Mathys Tel transfer, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I echo some of the sentiments of Rohan. I'm not sure. I think it was like a terrible loan. Like, the output wasn't there, but I also think it's hard. I know
he
he's
didn't
got
match up to the fanfare, though, Sam, did he? Like, let's be honest. Like, when we were signing, there was such large fanfare behind the guy, but he didn't exactly, live up to that expectation.
But there's always hype, though. You know what I mean? It's like anyone's gonna be excited that like a once hot prospect like from Bayern Munich of all places, is coming to the club, and you've heard that he's rejected Man United. Like, that's obviously going to be hype. I think that you had to look a bit deeper at it to think, well, why would Man United want to let this guy go when they've got like Bayern Munich, when they've got a few injury-prone wingers, and Kane is not a spring chicken, as much as I still think he's got many a year in him. You'd think that Tel would get time there. So for him to come, I looked at it a little bit like he's gonna use us to basically like boost his stock again, because he's kind of lost his way. Not that I watched a lot of Bayern anyway, but I'd never really heard much about him. But I think that the first like 10 games that he played, or maybe a few less than that, but around that number, I was like, wow, this guy's actually kind of shit. I think it was the AZ Alkmaar game. We played them in the knockout rounds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we played them in the knockout rounds and we went there and we lost 1-0, his touch was awful. It was like those meme videos of Lukaku when the ball's just like flying off of him. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I thought this guy was supposed to be, quite techie, and he had a little bit of like the injured Richarlison look about him, where he couldn't, nothing was quite going right. He didn't look 100% fit, which, to be fair to Ange, he did say, he's not fully fit yet when he came in, that he'd been, he had to sort of get match sharp again. And then I think that video came out where he went into the fans, and they were all sort of like really angry, and he was trying to like calm them down. And then also like the Ange video. And I think that after those, maybe, by the negativity of the fans, he was able to sort of feel a bit more at home in the club, I think. Like a bit more settled to the fact that like it's basically the team against everyone else, whether that includes the fan base, the owners, like etc., or rival fans. I think that's kind of how I see it. And from then on, he showed glimpses. He still didn't have as I agree with Rohan, he still didn't have like an amazing loan. He did miss a decent number of good chances, I think. And probably could have created a bit more, but he had like good 20 minutes here and there. It was never like a full half or a full game. But I saw enough that I was like, if we're bringing him in, and I agree with you, if we're bringing him in as the main winger like signing, then I'm worried. But if he's in to be the potential long-term successor for Son, something that we've said, a lot of Spurs fans have argued the club never have a succession plan. We lost Harry Kane, didn't sign anyone for a year.
It's okay to have a long-term successor to Son, because if you're taking out like what Son's brought, which is goals and assists on a regular basis, you have to have other players in other positions that are picking up that slack to give this time to develop to be the long-term successor of Son. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think the way we're looking at it is like, we're expecting this guy to just come in and automatically replace them goals. And unless they sign someone of significance, I think it's a strategy that's going to backfire.
Yeah, no, look, I think I've said this before, and you know, I'm no tactico, but I feel like the wingers were the most sacrificed position in the Ange system if they weren't scoring at the back post, which is obviously a huge part of it, right? But we never, I don't know if that's because Brennan Johnson's crossing is not good or the movement of the left-sided players wasn't as good as Brennan Johnson's, which is probably a bit of both. We didn't really create the inverse Brennan Johnson goal where he's putting it across to someone else to tap in at the back post. And that left winger, although I feel like we played a lot of our football down the left, Ange's system basically made fullbacks the most important position. And this is how I see it anyway, and sacrificed the wingers. So rather than the wingers being put in positions where they can potentially terrify defenses, not necessarily that our wingers have the ability to do that, but they are often on the byline with the fullbacks underlapping and making their runs in towards the box. So I feel like under a more direct manager like Frank is, you know, we've seen how he's played with Wisser and with Mbeumo. So it'll be interesting to see if given more attacking freedom to not have to just stand on the touchline, if the wingers, including Tel, can be more clinical because they'll have more chances.
I think there were plenty of games where Tel showed that he does have that talent and that quality, like Sean mentioned. That's just, I think the big question was, you know, can he actually contribute goals? And he just didn't. And that was a big issue with Spurs this last season, was I just felt like we weren't a clinical team. We didn't bury our chances that could have given us maybe more wins on the board. Of course, we still lost 22, 23 games in the league, but I think plenty of those games we lost were actually just down to a lack of finishing and a lack of that clinical edge. And Tel was probably being brought in, you would think, to help alleviate that. And I don't think he did. That being said, though, I think he showed, at least on the left wing, you know, he's a very tricky player. He's a guy that does clearly have that bit about him and was, in my opinion, one of the best players in that away leg in Frankfurt. I thought he did a very good job in that game and dragging us up the pitch and actually creating opportunities. I think he is a creative player. So ideally, I think the best situation is like maybe what DB mentioned earlier. You bring in more of a mainstay guy to replace Sonny, and then you have Tel sort of cooking along in the background as someone that can then replace, you know, that mainstay person.
If that's the plan, that excites me.
That, so you'd be behind that. Yeah.
If that's the plan, Jack,
okay,
that excites me to no end. You know what I mean? You've got a ready-made player, and then off the bench, if you want to freshen things up and get a young, enthusiastic lad to run at them that has the skills to be able to take them on and stuff, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Where my concern
that is the plan, though, isn't it? That has to be the plan, Dave,
well,
right?
I would hope that's
we hope.
Where my concern comes about, and look, this is just a cynical Spurs fan in me, and every Spurs fan has a bit of cynic in them, you know, unless you're Sean Butler and have a good understanding of how boardrooms work. But, you know, for me, you know, the cynic in me, I look at it and go, they want to give Solomon a chance. They're bringing in Mathys Tel. You know, they brought in Thomas Frank to develop guys, and my whole opinion is I don't think they're going to go out and spend this big money and bring in ready-made players. I think that's why they sacked Ange Postecoglou to a certain degree. That was the next step. I don't think Daniel Levy wants to commit to large wages and stuff, because if it doesn't work out, he gets rid of them. He's stuck with these guys and stuff. So for me, I think the plan is to continue on the same way we're doing. And what I'm looking at is sell Son, and then Solomon, hopefully, can come in preseason, have a good preseason. They'll keep him and then Mathys Tel. That's where the reports are leading me to right now, and that's where my concern comes in. Around that side of the pitch, like if they're selling Son, they're bringing a ready-made player and then have Tel off the bench. Like I said, I'm on board, but the reports are the cynic in me when I look at the reports. Solomon, Tel, and Son's out of here.
I think you got to do this super chat.
No, work away.
Just quickly.
Well, Mark, he's a very patient guy, Sean.
I appreciate you, Paul. Appreciate you boys as well. Just my. So I believe that, and Johnny will verify this. Johnny and I have been talking about this for months and months and months. That this sell to buy nonsense that was pushed out by that guy Matt Law, for different reasons. Johnny and I have got different reasons to believe this, but we both land on the same conclusion that essentially it's a load of waffle. Yeah. And that in a nutshell, on top of that, when you listen to and I'm not sure if you're going to mention the Levy interview, but when you just heard it, like I know he's like a little bit of like saying what you want to hear, but he says the intention is to win the Champions League, to win the Premier League. In order to do that, I know, but in order to do that, you have to also pay attention, which is what I always ask of Tottenham fans that are like hammering Daniel Levy around like why the lack of success over the years. You have to pay attention to what's going on at other clubs. And I would, if I'm urging the Tottenham fans to do that, I hope that Daniel Levy's doing that, because if you look at what's going on in the ambitions of the other teams that are the perennial Champions League spots, Chelsea, United, Arsenal, the usual big five, Liverpool have dropped 250 million quid already this summer and are going to spend more. Manchester City have spent nearly 500 million quid since January. Arsenal are about to do a bomber or two on 2 or 3 players coming in. Chelsea have already got Liam Delap. They're looking at Jamie Gittins. Like Chelsea are about to bring in 2 or 3 other. However they do it, they find their way to just spend money galore, right? And Newcastle, and Manchester United as well. Like they're trying to make that kind of the bottom of the V thing to be very short and the bounce back up. So if Daniel Levy's sincere when he says that we want to win the Champions League and the Premier League, and he's not just placating people, and I know everyone's suspicious and cynical of what his words are, but he has to be paying attention to the fact that we only have 4, maybe 5 spots in the Champions League that Tottenham can access the Champions League via, because we're not going to win the Champions League anytime soon. We haven't got the squad for it. If he's going to do that, or he's going to say those words today, and then by the end of August, we're going to have Manor Solomon and Mathys Tel and Yang and Mikey Moore and Brennan Johnson and Richarlison as our winger options for next season, he will look like an absolute bozo. So for me, I just cannot believe that he would say those sorts of things and then give us Manor Solomon and Yang and Mathys Tel. It just doesn't. He's not that much.
He better be a man of his word. Yeah.
I just wonder how much of what he said was down to arousal by Vinay. You know, he was saying some very nice things to Daniel Levy and stuff like that. You know, I wonder how much.
Yeah, but there's editing.
Red wine was talking.
We just promised the world. We just promised Tottenham fans Champions League ambitions here and Premier League ambitions. Should we put that out? We are in the middle of a transfer window.
Yeah, the director, the producer was like, "You sure you don't want to retake that? We can cut that out." You know,
just on that quickly. What I will say is,
we've got to be sustainable, guys. We've got to be sustainable.
What I will say is, that rhetoric is completely different to the fan forum he had a couple of years ago. You know, when he was asked about winning, his response was, you know, we want to play good football, entertaining football, and try and compete. This time he's saying, we want to win the Premier League. We want to win the Champions League, which then maybe does give more credit to them wholesale changes that people are talking about that may be on their way, that there is this financial influx that are coming in. They have this plan and they're ready to unleash it at some point. But again, I wonder how much of it was gotten a stiffy and a high from Vinay buttering him up, that he just got a little bit overexcited.
Now that red wine could have been
He went in hard. No lube was used.
But he has to realise the quality.
They're in the honeymoon period, Johnny.
Listen. I'll rub mine if you rub yours. Look, the thing is, there's no way. I'm just telling you. I know this guy, right? I mean, I do actually have friends that are Arsenal supporters. I know it's a controversial thing, right? Outside of here, I do know people who are Arsenal fans. Vinny, our cousin Vinny, right, is a top guy. Is a top guy. I said this to Sean. I don't believe for 1 minute he's going to turn down private equity jobs in Saudi or in America or going to work for Newcastle and leave Arsenal. I mean, I know we left a year ago, but to come to our arch rivals and big it up without hearing the plan. They would have pitched him exactly what's going on, what's available. And with Charrington coming in, like I said in March, when no one was interested, when I said Peter Charrington was coming in and what a big move it was. And when Vinny come in, things are afoot, times are changing. No one was interested. Now they're interested. And I actually do believe that things are changing, and with Vinny here, we're going to have proper interaction with the fan base, understanding what the fan base aren't getting, and I believe that things are going to be more progressive. The other thing I believe is that sorry, my son's shouting out. The other thing I think is that we will spend the money. We will spend the money. Just going on to Mathys Solomon, right? I know it's a touchy subject, right? But, you know, this guy can play left wing, right wing, and he can play as a false nine, right? He is flexible, right? And he does offer stuff. And what he does have is he's a player that takes players on. He's brave, takes players on. Brennan Johnson, please note, right? Low centre of gravity. And the way he twists and turns the ball, he causes problems, creates space, wins free kicks. And that's what you want. Thomas Frank wants brave players. And I've got to tell you, Brennan Johnson, he needs to learn to be brave and not check back and pass back when he gets down that flank. I don't know what happened. I saw the Wales game. Was it against Belgium? I thought I was watching the wrong Brennan Johnson. He was taking players on. And I hope Thomas Frank instills that in him. But I think we're too quick to judge for all the wrong reasons. And I think if we trust in this manager, which I do, as a tactician and a guy that develops people, let him come in and let him decide what's right and what's
Johnny,
wrong.
It goes back to the same question, mate. If he decides he's good enough, then where do we make space for the better player that we all want?
Let Thomas Frank decide that. Like I've always said, this is a squad-based game. This isn't an individual game. This isn't about.
There's only so many spaces in the squad, Johnny.
Yes, I understand that, Sean. But players will go. But you've got the hots.
Who do you go? Who do you get rid of?
Vinny's got the hots. Vinny has got the hots, right, for Daniel.
Just
right, buying him a bottle of red wine and all the rest of it. And Sean's got the hots for getting rid of Manor. But listen,
no, I haven't. I'm just saying someone has to go. Someone has to go.
Someone's got to go as long as it begins with M and ends with S.
No, not at all. I don't care if they hadn't signed Mathys Tel and they brought him in and that was it. And I'll go, fair enough. That's bring him back in. Fair enough.
I'm clipping the M&S. I'm clipping M&S.
He wants M&T, not M&S. M&T, Mathys Tel. Paul Markey from earlier saying
M&S.
Paul
What's
Markey.
What's the? It's not just any boss. I mean, it's M&S special, right? So let's see what happens. Let's see what happens.
And Eminem to perform at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium this summer. Paul Markey saying, sorry, guys, he's just behind Vicario at the moment. With development, he'll surpass him. His fielding of crosses to the box, almost Gaelic football-esque. I mean, Dave, take that one away.
Yeah, look, with the GAA, one thing I've always said is, and I think it's something that keepers should actually look at if they are struggling to come out and, compete in the air for crosses and stuff. Come over and do a month with the GAA team, fielding it's all about getting up, catching that ball and fielding that ball, and that's what it's all about. And I think, you see cross between, like rugby took a lot of their professional, when they went into professional era from the NFL and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And I just think if a keeper is struggling, I think it would be good to send them out to Ireland for a month, work with a GAA coach, on fielding that ball, and you'd have no problems whatsoever.
Gotcha. I think, we pointed that out that is Vicario's, big need as well, Paul Markey, that he needs to improve in that area quickly, especially with a Frank style defense. Just wondered if anyone wanted to comment on this, and then we'll move on to Brian Mbeumo and Semenyo. AK Sheg saying we have to sell Son. We are a much better side without him. Does anyone feel like they are steadfast and feel strongly about getting rid of Son this summer?
He has to go. He absolutely has. Again, no hate for him, no disrespect to him. I love Sonny. I want him. There's many reasons why I want him to go. None of them are because I don't like the guy. I love him. I think he's a legend, but there are too many tales of players that stay around the party too long. At some point, the party must finish, and it's best that you have your last dance with the prettiest girl in the room and get a kiss and say goodbye. And that's what he did with the Europa League trophy, right? Exactly. He kissed the prettiest girl. He kissed the trophy, the prettiest girl at the bar, and he got a number, and he can disappear off going, I've had a really good night at the party. And to me, I think it's time to go, not just for him, because if he hangs around, how many people reflect favorably or as favorably on Hugo Lloris as we would have done had he sunset his career at Tottenham 2 years earlier than he did. Right. Most people remember Hugo Lloris walking off the pitch 5-0 down against Newcastle, never to come back and don his gloves again. That was a shame. It was a massive shame. And for me, I think that Sonny, if he continues on his decline, people will remember the latest version of him, not the version of him that we can if he calls it a day right now. On top of that, we can get 40 million quid. We can put it back into the budget that we need for these monsters. And on top of that, as I've said all month on the channel, on my channel, and all night tonight, it comes down to a numbers game. We have 11 wingers. We can't keep them all and also get someone else in. So Sonny has to go.
Just to say, I mean, like it reminds me of the punch drunk boxer who wants one more fight, you know, like your Muhammad Ali's or whatever, who've had one fight too many. That's where I feel Son is. For me, just sail off into the sunset and goodbye.
And Danny Kiriakou has a quick question in here. I know
Not him again. Not him again.
Big up, Danny.
I think we can move on to the Mbeumo.
No, I just said that I believe that he has the money. I never mentioned Levy. I mentioned Charrington and I mentioned Vinny.
Yeah, he's got a crush on Vinny. It sounds like Danny Kiriakou. Not as much Levy.
Never mentioned Daniel.
I think we need to find out if we start bringing in these players if Danny Kiriakou will be Levy in.
Yeah,
big up, Danny.
Well, speaking of players, we can
nice
bring in.
It'd be nice for Danny to be on the right side of history for once. Come on, Danny.
He's got the receipts. Spurs are being linked with a big money move this summer for Bryan Mbeumo or Antoine Semenyo. Do you believe Spurs could land any one of these players this summer? And do you have a preference between one or the other? We haven't gotten to you in a while, Sam, so you kick us off.
Sorry, Jack, what about Eze? What all of a sudden?
Not seeing it in the rumor mill, Johnny, unless you have an ITK story for me.
No, listen, I'm just saying you cannot rule him out.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I'm saying. You can't rule him out. I think, if any player of all of those three, I think Eze, before we were linked to Mbeumo, I think most Spurs fans would have banged one out all day long if they heard that Eze was coming. Yeah, what you saw with the buttering up of Vinny and Levy would have been nothing to the scenes that you would have seen have Eze turned up.
I would prefer Eze over either of them, actually, to be honest. He would be my number one choice. Sam, we haven't gotten to you in a while. Do you believe the Mbeumo rumors, the Semenyo rumors? Would you have a preference between one or the other?
Well, I got really excited when I saw that.
I'm talking about that here.
I got really excited when I saw the rumors that supposedly we'd bid 70 million. And then about 2 or 3 scrolls later, I came across Alice Talks Football's tweet, which was basically like, if you believe that Daniel Levy spent 70 million, give your head a wobble, basically, not in those words, but that's pretty much what she said. And this, I had about 30-40 seconds of oh my God, we're bidding 70 million on Mbeumo. I'm so excited to
post Mbeumo clarity. Yeah. Clarity. Yeah.
Exactly that. But, it's funny because over the last, week and a half or so, since we've sort of had these Mbeumo rumors, I'm seeing a lot of people sort of putting down Semenyo, the idea of signing Semenyo. And it's funny because, again, Sean, you mentioned this a lot on your show about receipts. We can say things on here that people will obviously bring up later on, but I'm sure that most of the people that I'm seeing on Twitter would have been like, oh, Antoine Semenyo, what a player. Because, there was that period of time last season when we were kind of linked to the entirety of Bournemouth, when it was looking like Andoni Iraola was becoming sort of the lead favourite amongst the fan base. And, people were saying about Semenyo, he looks really good. And I'm the same, I have also sort of turned more to Mbeumo over Semenyo. But every time I watch Semenyo play, other than a couple games against us where I actually was a little bit he didn't really do anything. But he just, he takes his men on, he cuts past people. He can hit it, as you said, he can hit it with a lot of power and conviction. So I would be open to Semenyo or open to Mbeumo, and maybe Semenyo, if he ends up being the fullback option, maybe that, it was meant to be and he ends up being, a great player for us, hopefully. In terms of whether I think we'll sign one or any of them, that remains to be seen. And, so many times we've needed certain things and it's not happened. We've gone into the new season underprepared, one striker or one goalkeeper or anything, and now I'm kind of we we do need one of these players. I know Sean says about the 11 wingers thing, but the wingers aren't good enough. So the question is getting rid of, as you said, wingers to make space for wingers that could potentially improve the squad. I do like the idea of Eze because I feel like his versatility will always kind of find him a place in the team. And and even if he starts on the wing or centrally in a game, that Frank can always change it and put him on the wing or centrally and bring someone else on who he thinks is going to impact the game. So the flexibility of Eze, plus also he just seems like an all-round really nice guy. I think I'd also be leaning probably towards Eze, but I'd pretty much be all happy with all three of them.
I think they would all cost around the same price, though, which is kind of the interesting thing, right? Like Mbeumo could cost around 70 million because Man United are already spending close to that. Eze, we know, had that release clause that was around that amount, and I imagine you would still have to spend close to that. And then with Semenyo, he's got so many years left on his contract, it would basically have to be another record-breaking signing for Spurs. So it's really just who you'd prefer and whether you actually believe Spurs would spend that much money, I guess.
If we're serious, though, Spurs go out and deliver two of them. We're off the back of a Europa League. We're going into a Champions League campaign. You're after signing a new manager. Whet the fans' appetite. Wet the lips of the fans, bring in two players instantly. That would give me an absolute rager. My desk will be on a permanent tilt watching that, during watch-alongs and stuff like that. If we're a serious club, that's what you go and do. Look, Jack, you know me. I've been a long-term admirer of Semenyo. I was probably one of the first ones on fantasy football to put him in the team at the start of the season and say, watch this guy. I really like Semenyo. I think he's a chaos merchant. However, if you're weighing up on Mbeumo and Semenyo, I do think of Mbeumo as a lot more consistent goal contributions and outputs than Semenyo. For me, that's the difference. But I can see how someone like Semenyo would fit into a Thomas Frank side. Just let him loose, let him go and stretch teams, let him run at teams, let him, have a bit of chaos about him. I think that's one thing we missed last season to a large degree. Everything was intricate, 5-yard balls. Sometimes you just need to say, there's a ball, go and fly, be free, be my eagle. Do you know what I mean? Go and do your thing. Sometimes you need a player like that. Eze, he'd be a fantastic player, because not only could you fit him on either side and he can create chaos, but if James Maddison is having one of his off periods, sit on the bench, bring in Eze, what I mean, and let him go and affect games. And I think just having that healthy competition around will actually be good for Tottenham Hotspur, because those who want to sit and moan and bitch and moan about it, off you go. You're not here for the right reasons. Those who want to sit there and fight for their place, brilliant. And that's how you weed out the wheat from the chaff. And a nice famous saying that Shawnee Butler like. So for me, if we're serious, you go and sign two players across that front line. Yeah, it's what this front line needs. It's fucking piss poor, inconsistent. They pressed high last season, turned the ball over multiple times, and they ended up fucking it up. It's so badly that the ball was being turned over and put in the back of our own net. That's one large part of why people hated watching last season in general under Ange Postecoglou, because he was known for this famous attack of football, but he couldn't deliver it with the players that we've got, and it's just nowhere near good enough. It needs a revamp, and that's where the money needs to be invested if they're serious and they want to get fans behind. If there is this new wealth coming in and this new project, deliver both of them and say, there you go, guys, jack yourselves off, have a field day.
Can I ask you a question?
We've been a lot of jacking off tonight. It's been a lot of jacking off tonight.
Yeah, it's been a lot of references to that.
Yeah. It's all about kissing the girl at the bar, mate. Johnny, we've landed on this ridiculous thing. I just want to ask a quick question if I can.
Carry on, Phil.
Yeah, mate, I used to love those things, mate. Back in the day when I knew where my right hand was.
Carry on up the Khyber.
Carry on with the innuendo.
I think if we signed Eze and Mbeumo, I think even the most negative fans would be beside themselves with excitement.
100%.
I really do.
Someone's going to get a Levy tattoo.
I've already got. I'm taking orders, mate. Taking orders on the on the receipts on that one. I've got a little commission with a local tattoo parlor. I wanted to ask you guys though. I know we're not really talking about this right now because there isn't really that many links in that regard. Do you guys feel as strongly? I know you used to last season about the need for a monster six. Like sort of been saying it for obviously ever. I think everyone in the club, everyone in the fans thinks that we need a defensive midfielder that's an absolute baller. Does that is that need? If you were to prioritize right now, we're talking about right now. Go and get both, right? Go and get Semenyo. Go and get Eze. Go and get whatever. Go and get Mbeumo. Go and get Semenyo. Whatever. But in terms of like the pecking order priority, Jack, like are we talking about like winger first, then a 6, then a secondary winger / creative player, or is it two winger creative players, then a 6, or is it 6 first? Like, what's the pecking order of the priority? I think everyone can agree that like a centre back / fullback is like kind of probably it's still important, but like bottom of the needs list, and a striker or whatever. But like in terms of those 3 positions, creative player, winger, 6. What's your priority, guys?
6 for me.
Okay, no, go on. Sorry, I was just going to say.
Yeah, I was just going to say 6 for me all day long. As much as I'm excited about the rest of it, the way Thomas Frank plays, he overloads the flanks in triangles. Therefore, on the counter attack, you leave space, and he needs a Monta 6. He needs a 6 that reads the game and intercepts. He had Norgard there before. I mean, he's 30 years of age, but still doing the job. We need a Yao Pedro or Yao Gomez. Yao Gomez or a Douglas Luiz. I feel we need a 6 first and foremost in this club. I think it's the non-negotiable for me.
I disagree with 6 being the priority, and the reason why I say that is if you look underneath on Jose and Conte, the reason why their counter-attacking approach worked is because they had Kane and Son to work with. At the end of the day, if you have counter-attacks, you're limiting the amount of attacking chances you generally would make if you were playing attacking football, which means you have to be absolutely devastating. And at the end of the day, defense can set you up with the foundation of going winning games. You still got to go and score consistent goals and assist consistent goals to be able to go and win them games. And for me, that's why I say the forward line is imperative, because when I look at Thomas Frank, when I look at our midfield options, Archie Gray was brought in to be that CDM. Bentancur can't suffice for a season. However, if you actually really want to help Thomas Frank out, you bring in a winger, you bring in that attacking sort of other attacking player we need, and you also go and get that CDM. And the reason why the CDM is important is just if Frank wants that tactical flexibility like he had at Brentford, where he can either go 3 centre-backs and play with that 1 week, or go with 2 centre-backs and get that CDM to sit in there and protect them centre-backs. If you want to be able to give him them options, you've got to deliver all 3. If not, you are saying, great what you've done at Brentford, but you're not going to have that much flexibility here and you're already hindering him doing his job. So for me, I don't think it's actually unreasonable to ask the club, even stretch to the 4th, and go and get that other fullback that's desperately needed and go and fix the problems in this squad and give him them 4 signings. I don't think 4 signings is a massive ask of a club like Tottenham Hotspur's magnitude with the money they're supposed to have in order to fix the holes on the squad to help the manager be able to go and compete. Daniel Levy can't be sitting there talking about wanting to win the Premier League and want to win the Champions League and then saying to Thomas Frank, well, we might get you your fullback and we'll get you maybe your attacking option, but the rest you're going to have to find ways around. Them days have to stop. You said it yourself, Sean. You look at the amount of teams starting to compete for Champions League football now. Correct. They're starting to throw money at it. They're starting to get their business done earlier in the market. They're starting to bring in big players. It's the way we need to start operating. If we want to give Frank a chance, we've got to fix them holes in the squad. If you fix them holes in the squad, that's where you can truly say and really, have a really good reflection of whether it's a good manager for the club or not. Because
so are you saying, sorry, just to clarify, are you saying winger first, then a 6, and then back to the winger?
If we want to be if we want in terms of priority, you get your attacking players in, because you still have to go and win games of football.
So two attacking players first,
and then bring in your CDM. But if we're serious and we really want to push on and go and compete and help Thomas Frank, 2 attackers, 1 CDM, 1 fullback / left-sided centre-back, and I think away you go. You give Thomas Frank a really chance.
Thomas Frank has apparently said that the one non-negotiable in his list of demands was a new number 6. How true that is?
Oh, well, Norgard was essential to what he done at Brentford. He sat in front of them.
I mean, I'm just saying that is his. He didn't say my non-negotiable is a striker, another midfielder. I'm not saying he doesn't want an Mbeumo or an Eze, right? Because he will. But I'm saying his non-negotiable was a 6. Look, we've all seen it. Sean and I have spoken to a blue in the face about the 6. With Angie's system with more holes than a Swiss cheese. But I think that in Frank's system, he also needs desperately a 6. And, you know, I think Douglas Luiz is a great call personally. Not that just because I've called it. I just think Premier League experience, very good player, Brazilian, knows his stuff, and he's performed at the highest level. Don't forget, he's gone Villa, did really well, gone to Juve. Not been brilliant. I think they'd let him go. And we all know about Don Fabio's links with Juventus and the ability to get players who aren't quite doing it there and getting them out. So I'm going to go Douglas Luiz or Yao Gomez at, what's the name? Walton is a fantastic player, but dealing with Steve Parish, you can forget it. You're looking at 70 million plus, you know?
Probably.
Jack, what's your priority, mate?
I've just said before, I said it all last season. I do think Spurs had issues all over the shop last season, but I did feel like the most consistent issue is I just didn't think we were actually a clinical team and just didn't really put away the opportunities that we created in games. I felt like there were plenty of times where we could have won games by more or wouldn't have let leads, go away or slip away had we just had a more clinical forward line. So for me, you bring in a top level winger, someone that can create and score goals, do both. They need to be able to do both. And then I would look towards a number 6. So forward first, number 6 second, and then fill out the rest of the squad as you do. But for me, the biggest issue last season was just not putting away chances. Even though we scored plenty of goals, I don't really rate our forward line. I really don't.
Fair enough. Sam, can I ask you the same question, mate? Sorry to take over the host.
No, it's a good question. Good question. Wish we had it on the script.
Once a host, always a host.
So yeah, for me, probably I would also prioritize the 6, I think. Because last season, going into this season, I think pretty much every single fan said, we need a monster type 6. And I think that also ties in with the fact that, maybe our most defensive midfielder in terms of, the experience we have is Bissouma. And for me, I'd probably look to sell him. I think a lot of people are in a similar boat. So to not have any of that, obviously Højbjerg's actually leaving the club this season as well. And the lack of experience defense, I think, is just in the midfield is very important, especially if we're going to try and, be rigid in certain games. And I've seen a few people talking about that Palhinha, and I feel like he's the kind of guy that, can make 100 challenges, like a Joe Ellington, can make 100 yellow card challenges and get booked in the 87th minute. Yeah. And I feel like that's the kind of shithousery and spite that we don't have. So for me, it's that. I think that we quite desperately need a left back. If that left back can also play left centre back, then that's a bonus. But I think the priority for me is a left back. So I just think that you can't over rely on destiny. You've seen, especially with the lack of breaks that these players have these days, the overwork, the overriding of some of these players, and in Destiny's case, he had 2 or 3 injuries. I just don't think you want to rely on them. I think that, Spence on the right-hand side, and I know he can cover left back, but he's a right back, and hopefully we can bring in someone who is, good. I really liked Rayan Aït-Nouri, so I was disappointed that he went to City.
Yeah, class.
He would have been a very good player.
Would you take Jarell Hatto, mate?
To be honest, Sean, other than seeing him pop up in the occasional FIFA team, I've never seen him play. So I can't say for sure. I've heard things about him. I'm intrigued by it. But there's a lot of players that play in other leagues that I just don't really watch play. So ultimately, I'm kind of just at the mercy of the club bringing people in or people.
All right. Well, how about this? Let me throw a different one at you then. From the Premier League, would you take if you were to reposition? This is just a fullback shout here, not a double, not a multiple versatile player. Would you take either of Kenny Tete from Fulham, who's a free transfer at right wing? Or would you take a Robinson, who's the left wing at Fulham?
Robinson.
Yeah, I mean, I've never.
Robinson,
I haven't scrutinized Tete's performances, but I've never watched him and thought, "Oh, that's a serious player." Whereas with Robinson, I feel like a lot of the times that I watch Fulham, he's not only their best defensive asset, he's also like their best attacking asset. And I feel like, it might be different in a different team. And, we've got an American in the group chat who says as much as he loves Robinson, he does have flaws to his game. So he's not sure whether he'd want to see him at Spurs. But I don't think that Robinson would want to be a backup left back. I know that Johnny hates the word backups, but if you're not first choice in this regard, if you're coming from a different club, seeing it as you're not going to be first choice, you're the backup, right?
But then you don't believe in your ability. If you're coming in and go, I don't want to be backup, you're not believing in your ability. A player that believes in themselves, will sign on the dotted line and say, look, Destiny Adoji, he's good defensively, but going forward, there's a weakness there. If I can come in and provide that and be good enough defensively, then I'm in. For me, they're the sort of players you want to sign that actually back themselves. Like, oh yeah, I don't care you've got there, no problem, I'm coming.
No, I hear that. The only thing I'd say is I'm intrigued to see what Destiny can do, in a more conventional wingback system. Because from what I saw of the beloved YouTube highlights before you sign the player, he was actually making a lot of runs like in behind, and he scored a few goals for Udinese as well that I saw. So I feel like maybe he's not the kind of player that wants to cut in on the inside and dribble it past like three players, but he's got the ability enough to like get in there, create chances, and
but he hasn't shown that Tottenham though. Like, I think when I look at
has, but that's what I'm
saying.
I'm thinking in a more conventional sense.
Yeah.
Like if he was playing in the same system as Robinson, like it's tough to say who would be better.
Fair.
So yeah, look, I mean, obviously, I think to finish the original question of like what do I prioritize? I don't know whether I prioritize the left back more than I prioritize a new winger, because I feel like that sort of inside forward second striker position is going to be important for us, and I'm intrigued to see how Frank sort of looks at Brennan Johnson, because he pursued him quite a lot when he was at Brentford, and now he's got Brennan to work with. But I just wonder if he might actually see that maybe Brennan's attacking game and dribbling game is not quite up to the level of Mbeumo, for example, and they do need to bring someone in. And look, maybe that falls back to the Man or Solomon thing, because the one thing that Solomon can do is dribble, right? So I guess we'll have to wait for preseason, but I think that we need to bring in like another one of these strikers. I'm not sure if any of you guys have seen anything about this like Cala Moendo guy from Rennes. His compilation looked semi-decent. A lot of the shots were kind of right at the goalkeeper, so it was tough to kind of feel maybe the goalkeeper should have saved that. But
I'd rather keep Richie. And
I think he's I think he's more of a striker too, so that would be I guess a replacement for Richarlison, you would imagine, in his case.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I don't know. I think if the right offer comes in for Richie, I would sell him purely because he's not available enough.
He ain't going, mate. He's a cock block of the epic proportions. He is not leaving.
When you see like
Leonardo da Vinci.
He's ready to get injured right now. So
Richie, what Richie does is he disappears, and then when fans really need someone to step in and step up, that's when he delivers.
Yeah.
He can't do it consistently. So what he does is he waits for the real need for it, and then he steps in and goes, "Look, guys, remember me? I'm here." But honestly, I would rather keep Solanke and Richarlison than bring in that guy, to be quite frank.
Yeah, look, I think as well with Richie, like when you see all these bench cams, after goals have been scored or like moments before the end of the Europa League final, Richarlison is like more feral than fans behind. He can't contain himself. He loves it. And I think that again, like I kind of mentioned earlier on about Vicario and his like sort of ability, like his willingness to give his loyalty. I feel like Richarlison, from the I don't know much about Watford because I guess we don't really hear much about them, but like obviously Everton and Spurs, like you can see how much both the clubs mean to him. And in terms of attitude, I do like him, even if maybe he's not the strongest of mentality. I think that his resilience is something to speak about.
He's got so much love for any of the clubs he's played for. Surely you can't fit in a third one. That would be pretty difficult for Richarlison.
Break his heart.
We're wrapping up sort of the show here, though. Everybody, please do follow these links that I put into the chat. Sean's channel, as well as also the Football Link channel. I put in Sam's Twitter, Johnny's Twitter, Johnny's Instagram. I think Johnny we've held him long enough, and I know sometimes we get him in trouble with the misses. So please, everybody, do follow him.
He texted me saying his computer died. So.
Okay, well, we'll give him a good plug. So please, everybody, do take a look at all the links in the chat there. Johnny's towards the end. We had Hennessy coming in towards the end here, 30 months, saying, good evening, gents. Hope you're all well. Big up, Dave, Jack, and Sean. Apologies. Sam, I haven't watched you enough yet. He's saying I didn't recognize your game, I think is what he's saying, Sam.
Sam's a good guy. Sam's a good guy. We like Sam over here. Yeah. So you'll see a lot more of him. Every Tuesday is the plan around this Hennessy. So every Tuesday you'll get your Sam fix, my man. Big up. Good to see you.
And Hennessy, if you're looking, I think, to come on a show tomorrow, I know Dave is running an early morning live stream in case maybe you wanted to pop on.
Fixture list reveal.
Yeah. So in case you're interested, just get in contact. Hennessy, I know he would love to have you, sir. Appreciate the longevity of support as well, my man. And yes, I'll do everything I can, especially Dave now. I think Dave's been on the Richie train for a while now as well. We'll do everything we can to try to finesse Richarlison in the squad.
No, look, don't get me wrong. If there's a striker I look at and go, I like that, I'd trade Richarlison in a heartbeat. If you're trying to get rid of Richarlison and bring it in Rennes number 9, I mean, fuck off.
People are going, oh, he's the new Jermaine Defoe. I'm like, did any of you know about him before yesterday? No one did, right? So is it just because he's 5'9" and he's a black guy? He reminds me of Jermaine Defoe.
It's a little disrespectful to Jermaine, I think, as well. It's just completely
just
throw out
the
highlight reels. Out the window.
They look at the highlight reels and then look at the photos. Oh, he moves similar. You know what I mean?
Oh, jeez.
Madness. He was on nobody's radar. In fact, there is so many Spurs YouTubers, so many Spurs channels. I have never, ever once seen that guy's name even mentioned. By anybody as a good player to bring in. Sorry,
mate. I was asked yesterday, have you run in through the Y Scout tool? I was like, mate, I haven't even heard of his name before. And so I did a 40-minute Y Scout review of him last night, and then I spoke about. I'm not wowed by him in any way, shape, or form. Like, people that are saying he's awesome are just looking at the highlight reel. But if you go and look on YouTube and type in Ronnie Rosenthal, you'll see the best striker that's ever laced his boots up.
Sean, I've seen a compilation on Twitter earlier. It was like a 7-minute compilation of like all 17 of his goals or whatever.
Sam's one of these guys. He's exposed.
No,
himself.
it was just on there. So I watched part of it, and what I noticed, yes, he was scoring goals, but he basically hit 70% of the shots in a savable position, like at the goalkeeper or like through the goalkeeper, slightly to the side of the goalkeeper, And I was like, I wondered how that would translate in, bigger leagues and in Europe, whether he,
a lot of his goals were penalties as well.
Yeah. My takeaway with his striking is that he likes to place the ball. But to your point, Sam, like if you're going to place the ball rather than put your laces through it, you have to like place it into the side of the net rather than hit towards the middle. And I think it was a lot of bad goalkeeping that helped those numbers. And like Jack says, a lot of them penalties as well. I'm not over. Listen, if Tottenham Hotspur go down that path, I think it speaks for itself what the ambition is. So.
Defoe was more of like a Jamie Vardy. He loved to just smash it. He wasn't really as much of a placement kind of guy. 100%. I mean, he can, but he wasn't. I think of Defoe as bangers, most of the time.
I need a Panadol. Come on. Can't be talking about this Rennes number 9. It gives me headaches.
Every player is the second coming of Christ, Dave. Shawnee, please give yourself a plug. Spurs Talk Show, Football Link, please.
Yeah, so Football Link is Johnny and I's is a sort of total football channel. We do a show every day for an hour, bang on an hour, and we just round up whatever's going on in the world of football. So if you haven't subscribed to that, really appreciate it. It's growing really quickly. We're up to like 2,000 subscribers, and numbers are really cool. So yeah, it's just nice to be able to just sort of chat about other teams. To be honest, I always thought it wouldn't be that much fun talking about other teams, but actually not having your own subjective like biases attached, then you can just be free to kind of just sort of chew the fat. So it's quite fun doing that. So that's where you can find a Football Link, and then Spurs Talk Show. It's just what I do. I take the dog out in the morning and I do a live stream in the evening. I have just put a video out about an hour before we went live here, and I'm gonna see if I can squeeze out a live stream tonight at about 10:30 or 11 o'clock tonight. So if anyone's around for a late stroke, then we'll talk about a few bits and pieces. But thanks for having me, mate. Really appreciate you guys.
Class as always. Thank you, Sean.
I'm not sure whether this is Benji or Simeone, but they say failure at this club is not an option. Your chairman, Shawnee.
Yeah, listen, it doesn't matter whether it's Ben or Sim. Listen, there's one thing, if it's Ben, he's going to flip-flop depending on what happens. He'll tell everybody that, Ange had to go and, or that Thomas Frank's the new guy, he has to stay. And then as soon as the moment arises, they'll change their mind. And the other one will just be completely delusional the entire year and get lucky by backing the manager who ends up lifting a trophy. So, yeah, I mean, shout out to whichever one it is, Ben or Sim. I love you both. But, you're both donuts for your individual reasons. Love you guys.
Hey, it's the summer. Flip-flops need to be on. It's the summertime. We also have Johnny H's links in here. Yeah. Please, everybody, check out Johnny H. He's got exclusive videos, from inside the stadium that always are really good to take a look at, throughout the season. He also just posts, funny content, like even on, my Instagram, when his things pop up, they are quite funny, a lot of the memes and sort of Spurs lore that he puts up there. And then also, Sam, I had you in there as well on the Twitter. Thank you, Sam, once again for another shift.
Yeah, blessing as always, lads. Always a pleasure to come on. Shame that Johnny had to drop out. He clearly didn't like my use of the word backups. I know it gets his backup.
He's computer cracked
out.
He couldn't hack it.
You didn't back up his computer.
He backed up the computer.
He rotated his computer instead.
Yeah, you can catch me on here. You can follow me over to Twitter. My final thing to say on the matter of today in Tottenham is I'm still confused why. I know maybe Frank is on holiday, but you think there'd be like some sort of paragraph from the manager just to be like, when I come back, I'm like super excited to work with this talented group of players, So it's odd that we've not heard anything. It's just been sort of radio silent, and then we're linked to like 10,000 Italian league players just to let us know that the Don is back.
I hope he's back, but it's usually
Sean, you love it. Every 10 fucking plates spinning everywhere. Sean, you'll be all over it. Yeah. You're gonna have your work cut out, Sean. It'd be interesting to see how you can keep up with Paratici news.
Mate, I can't wait, mate. When Paratici's dangling those fishing rods and he's spinning those plates,
keeps us busy.
It keeps us busy, mate.
You know, every morning to keep up with it.
Bugsy Malone is going to be absolutely shattered because the heat is settling down, and she's going to have more walks, and she knows what to do with it. It's going to be fascinating.
The dog will look like Scrappy Doo by the time you go from Scooby Doo to Scrappy Doo.
Your bulldog turned into a bulldog by the end of the summer.
Please, Sean, please tell me that Fabio, please, he hasn't come up with something else.
Take a day off.
Take a day off. Fabio out.
But thank you, boys. Thank you for another wonderful shift.
Let you gentlemen go.
Yeah, we're gonna do the members' comments. Of course, you're welcome to stick around if you want, but plenty of good time to leave if you guys would like to. Now go on with your evenings. Have a good dinner.
Shawnee's at 5 p.m. tomorrow, guys, as well. By the way, I'll be over there doing Devil's Advocate. So 5 p.m. tomorrow on Shawnee's. Everyone, look out for that as well. But Shawnee, Sam, go and enjoy your evenings, enjoy the weather, enjoy your dinner.
All right, lads.
Class, lads. Appreciate you all.
Like and subscribe, everyone. See you later.
Thank you, Sam.
No, thank you. Thanks for saying that. Man. I don't even know if we're at 100 likes, so please listen to Sam, everybody. Hit the like button. I'm not even sure if we're at 100, so do hit the like button as we're getting to these comments here. By the way, if you are a member, in case you didn't know, we post to the best of our ability before the show something into the post part of the YouTube channel, the YouTube profile, where you guys can ask us questions for the end of the show. We reserve as much time as we can to answer these questions. And they're usually things that maybe we didn't get to address, maybe questions that you felt like we might have missed out on, things that you might just be curious about in general. So please do check these out. And just a perk of being a member and a perk of supporting us. So really do appreciate you all. Let's go to fantasy here. Dave McShane saying, what does the panel think of Spurs going for Harvey Elliott? I haven't seen any rumors of that. Dave, would you take Harvey Elliott? I'm not sure if I would. He's not really my fave.
I like Harvey Elliott. I think there is a player there of real potential. But what I will say is, I think was it the Jurgen Klopp documentary or the Liverpool? I was watching some documentary a while ago, and his whole career was about getting to Liverpool. That's where he wanted to be. His father's a huge Liverpool fan. He's a huge Liverpool fan. He wants to be there. I don't see him leaving anytime soon.
I don't know if maybe I just don't get to watch Harvey Elliott enough. Maybe I just don't have the best sample size. Sometimes when I had watched him, though, I did find him to be a bit guilty of what we sometimes accuse Brennan Johnson of doing, of just kind of passing it sideways, when he receives it. It doesn't always seem to be that eager to just run out his fullback, and really push. And he's not really a guy that likes to go down the byline or take it down the touchline. Really, he's someone that likes to cut inside almost every single time. And I think that can work in certain games against certain types of defenders, but you do need to show that you can go down the outside. And he's a guy that I think almost refuses to. It feels like he's very, very left-footed, left foot dominated, if you ask me. Maybe if he plays through the middle, it could be a different story, though. But I'm not a big fan, to be honest. Stefan Bloy saying, looking forward to this with a few pints. Jealous, man. I'm jealous.
Hopefully it went down well.
Thank you, Stefan. I think we missed you on the fan show, so hopefully we can get you back on sometime soon, my friend. Appreciate all the love. Scotty Heinem saying, who deserves the captain's armband if Sonny goes? Dave?
Look, initially I would have said give it to Romero. I think he embodies everything on the football pitch that you need. But
good question.
I think, it could end up being Rodrigo Bentancur. I think that was rumored with part of the reason why they were giving him a new contract is because they seen him potentially taking up that role.
I'd also probably give it to someone like a Romero, but I'm with you, actually. I think Bentancur makes a lot of sense, to be honest. I think also just maybe by the way he moves about on the pitch, right? I mean, you and I've said before, Mercedes-Benz class, silky touch, composure, but the guy, the ground he covers and the way he gets stuck in, he is a bit of a warrior as well. He has that sort of attitude where he will inspire others, I think, just by his own work rate and his own just sort of commitment. So I think that could be good captain's material. And, just the way he carries himself, he's a guy that I would definitely, be happy to get behind. So I'm all right with the Bentancur shout there. Rainman saying, what do we think is the ideal experience mixed by numbers per position? Oven ready, can start any game except, maybe I'm reading this wrong, 20-ish promising bencher. Maybe read this one, Dave. I'm not sure if I'm reading it.
What do we think is the ideal experience mixed by numbers per position? Oven ready and can start any game, 20-ish promising, or 20-ish sort of goal contributions over the season, or promising bench players if needed, under 21 academy prospects, loan or bench. So who do you think is the ideal experience?
25, right? 25 is usually kind of the squad base.
Yeah, look, I would argue back in the day when I grew up watching the Premier League, 20 was, if you didn't hit 20, and there was, I would argue, I think I remember looking at tables where the top 10 strikers in the league were hitting 20 goals consistently. Even the likes of Gerrard and
25
Lampard
players in the whole squad in general, right?
Yeah, but look, in terms of what do you think is ideal experience? Look, I would like to see 25 from our experienced players, because at the end of the day, you are losing Kane and Son. And the reason why we reached, the heights we did in terms of Champions League and everything else under Pochettino was not only did we have a good back line, but we had an incredible front line, and they're the standards that we need to get back to if we want to get back to consistently competing across the board from your experienced players. You want two players that can reach 25 each. And then you want some of your other players then to chip in with around 10 to 15.
The way I'm reading this question is I think he's breaking down the ratio of players you would have in your squad. If you had how many would you want to be young players? How many would you want there to be experienced players? How many of them would want to be academy prospects? I mean, ideally, it's hard to say ideally, though, because at the moment we're just such a young team, to be honest, Rain Man. We have so many young players coming through at the minute. So I'd just say add more experience. I don't think Spurs need any more young, talented players, to be frank, really. I think it's just about adding more and more and more experienced players wherever we can, really. And that's as much as I'm not sure if I have a magic number, but looking at Spurs' situation, Rain Man, I think for me, it's just about adding experience. I don't think there's any position where we need to think about adding, young talent or promise, of any kind. Really, it's just about getting in as much experience as possible.
What do we want to be? Do we want to be a developmental club, or do we want to be a club that goes and succeeds? Yeah. I think if you're looking at under 21s, don't have to be registered in any of the competitions, so you can stockpile them all you want, the ones that have come through the academy. So you're probably looking at about what you would want, at least a good 17, 18 senior, solid, good professionals. Then you can have some of your sort of middle of the road players that are on the periphery of being that, but they developed. And then the under 21s you keep around as much as you want.
Yeah. Jason Bell saying, which players do you think Frank is likely to want to move on? Basuma comes to mind first. Jason Bell, as much as he's a happy-go-lucky guy, he just strikes me as a guy that might not really. We said this before about Antonio Conte, right? Antonio Conte complained about Basuma of not understanding the tactical sort of elements, of the game, or at least not caring too much about it, or maybe not focusing on it. I think Thomas Frank is of a similar mold, right? He's a very, very intelligent manager, thinks a lot about sort of the system, the tactics of where you're supposed to be at the right time, these type of things. And the fact that Antonio Conte felt like he couldn't trust Basuma for that. And I think we sort of saw that under Ange Postecoglou to a degree as well. Like he's a guy that does tend to maybe drift out of position, maybe isn't at the right place at the right time, just kind of his head will just be somewhere else when he needs to be focused. I wonder if Frank wouldn't really, be keen on that. And just a maybe a controversial shout here, even though I really, really, really like Judd Spence, he does seem to have a bit of an ego about him, right? When he isn't being played, and when he isn't necessarily being given opportunities. We saw that he kind of seemed to, towards the end of the season, once again, kind of play within himself because he felt like he was hard done by. Maybe rightfully so hard done by, like that Udogie just sort of stepped in straight away for him. But, the fact that Frank says he doesn't like egos and he doesn't like dickheads. Not saying Spence is a dickhead, but that he does have a bit of that ego, maybe about him. And I wonder if Frank, can handle that, or, if let's say he doesn't play him in a game that Spence would prefer to play on or would have wanted to play on, would Frank, look at that maybe a bit differently than Ange did or other managers did, and Antonio Conte as well, managers, didn't like the fact that Spence complained so much, behind the scenes.
No, look,
it's just a controversial thing to say.
Yeah.
Just being controversial.
No,
really.
look, I can understand the reasoning behind it. Look, for me, it's not about who Frank wants to get rid of. If you're a smart manager, you analyze your squad and you automatically bin the senior players that aren't contributing, and then weed your way through the squad that way. If he's coming in going, I want rid of that guy and that guy, and some of them are guys that are contributing, then he's already set himself up for failure. If he's as great as everybody says, he looks at the squad and says, this is the bulk I can work with. I might not like some of the characters, but right now I need them for a year until I get further down the line. The ones that should be forced out the door, the players that don't fucking contribute.
Yeah. Rain Man saying I got the question spot on. Appreciate you, Rain Man. And I will give it a refresh. Good to see GJ, AK. Good to see you, sir. How are you? West Coast Spurs as well. Hopefully you're doing okay, Tony. And then Artist T, I will give it a refresh in just a second. Paul Connor saying, good evening, Dave and Jack. Hope you're both well. What players do you think Frank has in mind that he can improve immediately just by setting up to our current team's strengths? Also, what do you guys think the players are going to do? Do you think they will get behind Frank and perform to the best of their ability like we know they can play? Or do you see some of the players not listening to him and carry on playing like they did last season? I really hope that second question there isn't the case at all, man. I mean, they sacked Ange Postecoglou, pretty ruthlessly, right? So I imagine that if Frank is given any sort of type of autonomy and any sort of type of power, if he feels like somebody is playing within themselves or is not really getting behind what he's trying to instill in the team, you would think he gets an opportunity, at least in the first season, to get rid of some. And Ange Postecoglou, to be fair, got rid of a lot of players in his first season. There was a huge exodus. So you would think that Frank would be given that same power to be able to get rid of players that he feels like maybe are just not with him and maybe just not playing to his likeness. On the first question though, Dave, I mean, any players that you see him improving, really dramatically?
I mean, look, that's what he's all about, though, isn't it? He improves players. That's what he's about. Look, I think we've got great kids like Bergvall, Gray. I think Spence. If Frank can tap into that, I think you've got an unbelievably loyal player there. Could he get more out of Brandon Johnson? Mathys Tel, Udabur is one I'm looking forward to. I think the guy's got all the ability. I just think if Frank can develop that guy, that's one I'm really, really excited about, is Wilson Udabur. He would be the one for me that I think he could really bring on leaps and bounds. Kulusevski to a large degree. I think he could also evolve him if he pinpoints exactly what role he wants him to do in the team. I think he could even take Kulu to the next level. But to the other one apart, where Paul says players listening to him and stuff like that, that's more on the club. If a lot of these guys are after winning the Europa League trophy and they don't believe that this guy's going to win anything with them, then that's on the football club. They've made the wrong appointment altogether, in that regard. But at the end of the day, it also depends on what players they are. If they're your best players, from the outset, people go, get rid of them if they don't want to be here. That's fine.
Yeah.
Well, if Postecoglou was allowed to, if Postecoglou kept Harry Kane, he'd still be in a job today. And it'd be the same around Romero and players like that. Romero is the one that everyone's talking about with the timing of his tweet and stuff like that and his message for Postecoglou. Romero's the one everyone has big question marks around. But I'd say if I'm Thomas Frank, I'm going in there trying to convince this guy to stay and get him on side. Because if you get Romero on side, the rest of that squad falls in line. That's the reality of it. If you get him into a situation where we keep Romero, he doesn't get on side, the squad will follow Romero. They won't follow Frank. So for me, I think that's his first big test. Get Romero to commit. If you don't, you're already giving him huge problems because you're selling. Thomas Frank is known for defensive structure. You're selling your best centre back, just like Ange Postecoglou was known for his attacking play, and you sold Harry Kane from underneath his nose. So I'm just saying the warning signs are there.
Just quickly from me, I'm excited to see what he can do with Solanke because he's had so much success with strikers, right? Ollie Watkins, Ivan Toney did very well with Wisa and Mbeumo, Shada. So he's done well with forwards. So I'm excited to see what he can do with someone like Solanke if he can get the most out of him. Then also when it comes to Kulusevski, I think Kulusevski has a lot of the attributes that he probably likes. A guy that works really hard for the team defensively, but does have that creative quality, to work with as well. And then maybe lastly, it'd be fun to see what he can get done with Pedro Porro, because Pedro Porro, he did say has Trent-like qualities. And when he's saying that before he's even Tottenham Hotspur manager, it would show that maybe he would love to have a guy like Pedro Porro on his side. So I'm curious what he can do with Pedrito. What would be a dream transfer window be for you with transfers in and out?
Just quality signings. That's it. Just quality. That's it. I don't care how many, you bring me in 2-3 quality players. That's all. That's all I care. That's a dream window.
Monster number 6, someone like an Ederson or something like that for me. I would take Eze or Semenyo. I would have loved to have brought in someone like an Ait Nouri, but we do need a left back, to compete with Udogie. And then fill out the squad however we can. I like the Branthwaite, suggestion. I think that's someone that I could see do pretty well under Frank. If he is, going to come in, to compete with, the Van de Vens and the Romero, that would be amazing. That's what I would probably say. And then players out. Listen, Dave and I will have, a keep, loan, sell video coming out for you very, very soon, Paul Connor. So we'll probably be able to give you a lot more detailed answers on that one. And then can Frank win a trophy with this current squad domestically this season? Domestically, he's saying.
Based off what? He's had domestic campaigns under Brentford. What has he won? There's no excuse for it. Hull got to a final a few years ago. Palace are after picking up one. What's it based off? Nothing. He's not going to win a domestic trophy with this squad as is. This squad needs massive improvements.
I think that's a tad harsh because I don't think anyone expected Brentford to ever get far into any sort of.
No, but you look at it, Crystal Palace have, got to a cup final and won it. Hull City in years gone by, even though down in the Championship have got to cup finals and stuff like that. I'm saying there have been teams in years gone by of a similar level that have had cup runs. All he's had is sustained himself in the league. He's never, ever had a cup run with this Brentford team. He went out to Wrexham in one of the cups.
Iceman saying, Frank in the driving seat, where do we need to improve if Vic goes? Does Kinski start? Also, who replaces Sonny? I think we kind of answered that to a degree during the show, Ricky. Frank, I think he needs to try to improve Vicario when it comes to the defending of crosses, coming out and claiming them, being a lot stronger in that area. I think that is where Vic needs to improve the most. I think Vic will always look a little bit kind of sketchy playing out from the back, but I don't think Frank is going to have him play out from the back as religiously as Ange Postecoglou had him do it. I think he'd be fine with him getting it launched when he needs to. And then with Kinski, I'm just not the biggest Kinski fan really yet. I do think he's a tad bit overrated. And with who replaces Sonny, I think it has to be one of the 3 we've mentioned throughout the show. I think it's Eze and Mbeumo or the likes of Semenyo, really. And then we'll refresh here, Dave, and do artist tease questions if they come up here. Still not convinced by Frank what he's done at Brentford would get him sacked here. Do you think this Tel signing is Werner all over again? Jeez.
Well, that was I said that earlier.
I don't think anyone can do worse than Werner.
Not that he's like shite, Mathys Tel. I think there's huge potential. But my thing is, we signed Werner to come in and solve a problem. Didn't do it. We signed him again. Signed Tel to come in and solve a problem. Didn't do it. We're signing him again.
I just I don't know if you can do worse than Werner, to be honest. Artisty, I really don't. They tell, and even in his short loan spell, did better than what Timo did. In fact, he was playing ahead of Timo at the end of the day. Why do fans still buy the Lenga works in silence nonsense? Unless Parachi comes in, I don't see this being a good window. He works in silence in that he's doing nothing. That's what it is, Artisty. But Dave, yeah, I mean, are you desperate for Parachi to come in? Do you think this window is headed down a bad route if Johan Lange is the only one in charge?
Yeah, it concerns me. Because honestly, I don't think Johan Lange can even get in the room with the type of players that us fans are looking for him to sign. You know, we were here last season. You know, last summer going into it, we need 5 top quality players. The guy couldn't even get in the room with them. He brought in Solanke, which I would argue any DOF can go and get Solanke. That's not a major coup, you know. And then look at the players he brought in around it. The guy has shown he's had 3 windows. He can't bring in players of quality that we need to solve our problems. So if you don't bring in Paratici, then, because the way I look at it, Postecoglou's first year, Paratici made them signings, finished 5th. The second season, Johan Lange made them signings, finished 17th.
And then what are your meal plans for both Dave and Jack? Not too sure yet, actually, Artist T. Going out, meeting a friend later for a little sort of casual run, and then I'll probably get back actually pretty late from it. So might actually have to be a takeaway this evening. I'm not sure what it will be. Dave, any?
Yeah, well, my missus isn't too well at the minute, so I'm sort of on doctor duty at the minute. So, you know, I'm sort of left to my own devices in the kitchen tonight. Not a great chef. So I'm cooking a breakfast fry-up.
Nice. I haven't had breakfast for dinner in a long time. I used to actually love to request that from the parents when I was young, especially when I was in middle school. I used to love actually requesting that, and I'll be having a nice breakfast at some point. This week. I'm looking forward to having the American fry up. I prefer the American fry up to be honest. Everybody, hate to offend, but I like a good fried egg. I like a good hash brown. Done the American style, done the Yank style, and I prefer the Yank style bacon. Hate to disappoint you guys. But there you are, everybody.
Blueberry and pancakes for dinner. That sounds nice.
Yeah, that does.
Just quickly as well, Statue TV. Look, I'm not saying it's all Frank can do, but I'm taking off what he's done in the Premier League. What he done in the Championship, I couldn't care less about. I take him off what he's done in Premier League. That's what we hired him for. We didn't hire him for what he done in the Championship. And if we did, I'd be majorly concerned. But look, like I said, I put out a video. Go and watch it. I think there are elements that Frank can bring from Brentford that will actually, if he bring their quick changes he can actually make, that if he can implement them, will make us defensively more solid, which will help put more points on the board. But I also maintain to think that he's going to copy and paste what he done at Brentford and bring to Tottenham is naive. The guy will have to play a better brand of football. If he does not, they'll go the same way Nuno did, Jose did, and Conte did. If you're not winning games, playing more of a counter-attacking style of football, by half-time, fans are in them stands, moaning, upset, crying, and everything else, and you hear the frustrations in the second half. I'm just going off my experience playing under similar managers at this football club. He will have to adapt the style of play.
Porridge, babe, says Polly Cooper. I actually loved a bit of muesli when I was in the UK. I actually love a bit of muesli. Very, very tasty. But we'll end it off there, everybody. Thank you once again for all the support. Thanks to all the members for supporting the channel, sending in their questions. It's something that is kind of nice to sort of do as a bit of a palate cleanser towards the end of the show. Do as well, though, follow us over on socials, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all that stuff. We are posting videos over there as well. And thanks for supporting the channel. Look out for tomorrow. Dave is doing a fixture reveal reaction, so please join him for that. And then on Thursday, we'll have a longer form video coming out. We'll be doing our player season ratings, and we go through every single player. And I actually looked back on it. I think we were very, very efficient. We spent, not too long in every player, but we also got a lot out, in each one that we did. Yeah. So it was very efficient. It's like almost a longer form. I'll be interested to see if people's
thoughts match up, Jack.
Yeah.
Two controversial ones.
And we mentioned, I'm not sure if they're going to love, what we have to say here. So I think it was fun. Yeah. And I imagine there were plenty of opinions of ours that maybe plenty of you guys might not agree with. So
be ridiculed in the comments.
Do look at it, please, everybody. Do check that out. That's coming out Thursday. for you guys Thursday afternoon. But we'll see you all tomorrow. Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.